There are 185 prisoners on death row in the state of Texas. This is part 8 of the series. Britt Ripkowski, 52 years old, 24 years on death row. On December 22, 1997, he strangled his girlfriend Monica Allen and left her on the side of the road. He then took her 2-year-old baby girl, Dominic Frome, and drove to Houston, Texas. A few days later, on Christmas Day, Ripkowski murdered the little girl as well. He put her body in a suitcase which he left on the side of the road. After a week, he returned to the place he had dumped the body and buried the suitcase in a shallow grave. Currently, he does not have an execution date, as the court ruled he suffered from bipolar disorder and he will not be executed unless his mental health improves enough. Luis Perez, 61 years old, 24 years on death row. Construction worker and carpenter Perez has been on death row since a Travis County jury convicted him for the 1998 murders of Michelle Fulwiler, 30 years old, Cinda Barrs, 38 years old, and Barrs' 9-year-old daughter, Stacy Mitchell. On September 8, 1998, Mitchell, Fulwiler, and Barrs were discovered dead in their Barton Hills residence. Authorities claimed that Perez, a friend of Fulwiler, beat and strangled her after spending the night at her house. Then, after waiting until Mitchell got home from Barton Hill Elementary, he choked her. Perez killed Barrs by beating her to death with an iron tortilla skillet after she got back from work. Anthony HAYNES, 44 years old, 24 years on death row. According to court documents, the Harris County guy began driving around town with 2 companions in his father's pickup truck in May 1998 when he was just 19 years old and high on meth, holding up several passerby and stealing their wallets. Later on the evening, the group passed by a couple headed to a sports bar, Houston Police Sergeant Kent Kincaid and his wife. Kincaid recognized it was a bullet when something hit the couple's car and smashed the windshield. Kincaid pulled over while not wearing a uniform, approached Haynes, and asked to see his license. The officer reached behind to get his police identification when Haynes opened fire, striking Kincaid in the head before running away. After that, when authorities discovered that his father owned the truck, they detained him. Ferion Wardrip, 64 years old, 24 years on death row. A total of 5 women were essayed and murdered by Wardrip, a serial killer. In Wichita Falls, Texas, and the neighboring counties, 4 of the ladies died. Fort Worth, about a 2-hour drive southeast of Wichita Falls, saw the murder of 1 woman. The killing spree carried out by Wardrip started at the end of 1984 and lasted until the middle of 1986. All of his female victims were white, aged between 20 to 25, under 5.5 feet tall, and weighed less than 120 pounds. Juan Alvarez, 46 years old, 24 years on death row. On June 6, 1998, a group of people held a birthday celebration in front of an apartment building that was frequently used by members of the neighborhood street gangs. Gunshots were heard when a group of 5 cars approached the apartment building. Adrian and Michael Aguirre were both slain by bullets that also wounded several other people. The bullet casings that were discovered in the roadway had the appearance of having been shot from an assault rifle. Witness accounts confirmed Alvarez's status as one of the shooters. Juan Alvarez directed and took part in the shooting at Prestwood, according to testimony from Miguel Reyes, a member of the Southwest Cholos gang. Charles MAMOU Jr., 49 years old, 24 years on death row. Mary Carmouche, 17 years old, was in a group that met MAMOU on December 6, 1998 near the Astrodome, was killed, and MAMOU was found guilty of her murder. According to the prosecution, MAMOU and one of Carmouche's associates may have planned to steal from one another. Upon the arrival of Carmouche's group, MAMOU started firing, hitting Terrence Gibson, 22 years old, Kevin Walter, 24 years old, and Carmouche's date, Dion Holly, 21 years old. Gibson passed away. Walt and Holly made a full recovery. Following the shootings, Carmouche remained in the rear seat as MAMOU got in the group's vehicle and drove off. After she was made to engage in a sexual act, she was shot and killed. ANIBAL Canales Jr., 59 years old, 23 years on death row. When Canales joined the Texas Mafia prison organization, he was already serving a 15-year sentence for aggravated essay, according to the prosecution. Authorities claimed that the gang gave Canales and other gang members the order to kill Dickerson after they thought he had revealed they had attempted to smuggle tobacco inside the prison. Canales proceeded to Dickerson's cell with another gang member who strangled Dickerson while Canales held him down. Canales' lawyers have previously claimed that in order to get the gang's protection, he was compelled to comply with all of their demands. He was physically vulnerable as another jail group tried to kill him because of his previous heart attacks. Bernardo Tercero, 47 years old, 23 years on death row. An adult male was shot and killed inside the Park Avenue Cleaners by Tercero and one of his co-defendants. Berger was shot when he entered the Houston Dry Cleaners to place a clothing order. While his wife remained in the car, he brought their young daughter inside with him. Both saw the shooting. Berger received a gunshot wound to the left side of his neck and slumped forward onto the ground. When he was killed, he had been teaching junior and senior English at Reagan High School for a year. He was just 38 years old. Unknown sums of money were taken from the business. While his co-defendant fled to Mexico, Tercero continued to run, ending up in Florida. Travis Green, 55 years old, 22 years on death row. On September 2, 1999, Green broke into the residence of a white woman, 19 years old. He essayed her and then he killed her. The attacker was identified as Green by DNA evidence. In 2007, Houston police named 38-year-old Travis Green as a suspect in the 82-year-old Margaret McGinnis' death and essay in her house in the 1800 block of Crocker Street. On July 13, 1988, McGinnis was discovered strangled and essayed on the floor of her bedroom, according to the police. The assailant barred the door from inside the home after entering via the bedroom window. The case went unsolved due to a lack of witnesses or leads. The investigation was revived in August 2006 by the HPD Homicide Division's Cold Investigation Squad, who also transferred samples from McGinnis' autopsy to a lab for testing. Police said that Green's DNA was detected in the post-mortem evidence. Jamal Howard, 43 years old, 22 years on death row. The night before the murder, Howard took a gun from his grandfather and hid it. His family tried to convince him to surrender the firearm, but he refused. The next morning, he got the gun and proceeded several blocks to the Chevron shop. He peered through the windows, went inside, entered the locked office space where the victim was seated, and shot the woman once in the chest. He reached over the dead person to steal a carton of smokes before stealing $114 from the register. Before being informed that it was recorded on camera, he denied committing the crime. He said that he was not sorry for perpetrating the crime to the officer who collected his statement. Kerry Allen, 64 years old, 22 years on death row. Kiana Lachey Baker, the 2-year-old daughter of Allen's girlfriend, was essayed and murdered. Repeated hits to the child's chest and abdomen caused the death. Kim Jones, the mother of the little girl, who acknowledged previously hitting her daughter with a belt in the past, told police she had left for work that day and came home early when Allen called to indicate there was an emergency. The mother arrived to find the little girl dead on the floor. Near her body was a jar of Vaseline. When the ambulance arrived, Allen ran away but later surrendered. Robert Woodard, 43 years old, 22 years on death row. A Harris County jury found Robert Lee Woodard guilty of capital murder and gave him the death penalty. According to the evidence presented by the state, Woodard robbed the Houston convenience store in 1999 and shot and killed the owner, Tankachan Matai, and his wife, Achama Matia, who was a store employee during the course of the heist. He exited the store after getting lottery scratch-off tickets. Once outside, he stole a customer's car and left the area. The defense argued that Woodard's brother committed the killings and that Woodard had been misidentified by the witnesses. Rigoberto Avila Jr., 51 years old, 22 years on death row. In May 2001, Avila received a death sentence for the murder of Nicolas Macias, the 19-month-old son of his girlfriend. In February 2000, he contacted 911 to report that the child was not breathing while he was monitoring Nicholas and his girlfriend's other kid, who was 4 years old. According to court documents, the testimony of medical professionals supported the claims made at trial by El Paso County prosecutors that Avila stomped on Nicholas' stomach, causing the boy to suffer fatal blunt force injuries. According to the state and medics, only Avila could have killed Nicholas, notwithstanding the claims made by Avila's attorneys that the older child could have caused the injuries. Avila claimed in his initial testimony to police that he was in the other room when the older boy entered and informed him that he and Nicholas were wrestling and that he had put his hand over Nicholas' mouth when he stopped breathing. However, Avila claimed to have stepped on the child in a second statement to the police. JEDIDIAH Murphy, 48 years old, 22 years on death row. On October 4, 2000, in Garland, Murphy held a 79-year-old Caucasian woman at gunpoint and forced her to give him a ride. Murphy pushed the victim into the car's trunk after roughly 30 minutes of riding. As the victim was climbing into the trunk, he shot her. The victim was then removed from the trunk and drowned in a creek in Van Zandt County after Murphy had driven the victim's vehicle there. Murphy later bought smokes and booze using the victim's credit cards. OBIE Weathers, 42 years old, 22 years on death row. One night in February 2000, Weathers entered Pierce's Ice House, a bar in San Antonio, Texas, brandishing a handgun and hiding his face with a pillowcase with eye holes cut out. This was after a crime spree that included a string of burglaries, thefts, one murder, and one essay of an elderly man over the course of just a few months. Weathers announced his intention to loot the ice house to the customers, but he announced the 3 black males present to keep quiet because he only wanted to rob the white people. Weathers forced the waitress to empty the cash register after robbing the white customers. The waitress stumbled as she was handing Weathers the cash when he aimed his revolver in her direction. At this point, Ted Church swung at Weathers and grabbed him. Weathers shot Church 3 times in the head and once in the abdomen during the ensuing battle. Weathers stole more than $200 before fleeing, but he was caught 11 days later and admitted to this and other offenses as well. Church was shot in the pancreas, and despite being taken to the hospital and undergoing several surgeries, he died a few weeks later. William Spear, 49 years old, 22 years on death row. Spear was already serving a life sentence for shooting the father of a friend in Houston when he and ANIBAL Canales Jr. strangled Gary Dickerson to death in his Tedford unit cell on July 11, 1997. The man's affiliation with the Texas Mafia, a prison organization, is said to be what led to Dickerson's murder. Ivan Cantu, 50 years old, 22 years on death row. He was convicted in 2001 for the Dallas murders of his cousin and his cousin's fiancé, James Mosqueda and Amy Kitchen. Prosecutors have argued Cantu's guilt largely by pointing to forensic evidence and the testimony of Amy Bocher, Cantu's fiancée. His fingerprints were found on the murder weapon, and bloody clothes containing DNA from the victims were found in his trash can. He was scheduled for execution on April 26th, but the warrant was withdrawn as new evidence came to light suggesting he may have been wrongfully convicted and actually framed for the murder by his then-girlfriend. She passed away in 2021, and since then, evidence of her involvement came to light. Moreover, after her death, her brother started to call the prosecutors and lawyers to say that what he claimed at the trial was not true, that he was on drugs and his statements were all lies. Please hit that subscribe button if you like my channel. See you next time. Bye bye.